Well, welcome back. We're so glad to have you here today to come and spend some time with me while I ponder from Palm Coast some things that are going on. Today, I have a special guest, a good friend of mine, Rabbi Merrill Shapiro, has come to visit with us and share some thoughts and some things that are going on here locally. So, Merrill, welcome.
Well, thank you. I'm flattered and honored to be asked and to be here with you, Mark, and help people ponder. Ponder.
Well, that's the softest words we could come up with of all the things that are happening.
I'm a fan of a now defunct, one of the members died, something called Car Talk. Very popular on National Public Radio, and they speak from time to time about people who are unencumbered by the thought process. They don't ponder. And it says, the thought process needs to be more prevalent in our society today.
Exactly. So, Merrill, share with us a little bit of background. I know that you're a rabbi.
I grew up in northern New Jersey, and through high school, always had this question of whether or not I should enter the sciences, and engineering was a passion of mine and an interest, and still to a degree, or to follow my religious bent and head towards clergy or even Jewish education without the clergy element. And early on, I went to engineering school at Cornell University, and then later at what was Newark College of Engineering, is now called New Jersey Institute of Technology, and then jumped over to attend school at the Jewish Theological Seminary of America in New York, and ultimately to become a rabbi, also by a somewhat convoluted route. And that's how I became a rabbi. I was always interested in the educational aspect. And in fact, there were those who said to have real authority within the Jewish educational world, you need to become a rabbi. So I did that. I actually I received a fellowship to study in Israel and finished up my rabbinic studies in Israel. Came back, was only involved in education. That was in Columbus, Ohio. Moved to Rust Belt issues did what they did to Columbus, Ohio. An opportunity arose in Orlando. I became an educator at a large synagogue in Orlando, and a neighboring synagogue came and said, how should we develop our educational program? And we spoke for quite some time. Turns out that some of the people had also experience with Newark College of Engineering at the time, were engineers at Lockheed Martin, and they said at the end, would you become the rabbi of our congregation? And I said, anything's possible. I come from an entrepreneurial family, so we'll give it a try. And I did, and we grew a congregation from 70 families to more than 320 families.
Wow.
It's quite successful. Excuse me. About 12 years into my tenure as a rabbi there, one Friday evening in what we might call the fellowship hour, we're all drinking public soda out of and eating day-old Entenmann's out of styrofoam cups. The children of the 12 and 13-year-olds came in. I suppose you've heard what happened today in Teague Middle School. I said, no, I hadn't heard. He says, well, it was the end of February. We were summing up Black History Month, and Tiger Woods, who of course lived in the area, was supposed to speak to us and have us. He canceled at the last moment. So apparently the teachers had a conference, and the head of the Fellowship of Christian Athletes said, we have a program, we'll put our program on. So all the middle school children were ushered into the gymnasium of Teague Middle School, and the Fellowship of Christian Athletes did this cheerleading and tumbling and acrobatic program. One of the elements of it was to say that those who don't believe in Jesus are poisoning our school. Those who don't believe in Jesus are poisoning America. The children were very upset, and in fact, we took the school and the administration and ultimately the school board to task. We got an apology, and an administrator was, shall we say, reassigned. But then a group called the Liberty Council, that still exists in one form or another, and Matt Staver sued the school board for apologizing. Says, you're limiting our children in their practice of religion. They are evangelicals, and they want to evangelize the student body. They should be able to do so in the library, in the cafeteria, in the hallways, in the classrooms of the school. And at that point, we turned to a national organization called Americans United for Separation of Church and State, and that led me into understanding the need for greater separation of church and state. I became involved with them, rose through an advisory council, then became an officer, and ultimately the president of this national organization, again called Americans United.
Now, how
for
long
Separation
ago
of Church
did that occur?
Did which occur? My first encounter with them was in 1996.
At the middle school.
Oh, at the middle school? Yeah, I would say 1996.
So in 1996, the fingerprints of forced involvement of religion in our schools was started long before people even knew it was happening, huh?
Well, even the existence of something called the Fellowship of Christian Athletes. And this sort of means that non-Christians are not welcome, and it was one of the organized clubs and connected with the school, had the imprimatur, the stamp of approval of the school, and that was troubling in and of itself. So that had a history even well before 1996. But the involvement of and the co-opting of the church into our schools and religion in our schools continues to grow, even to this very day. And as we see, of course, here in Palm Coast, here in Flagler County schools, we find lots of church influences that disturb us greatly.
Christian church influence.
Well, you know what? I have to say that Christian, and I'll get in trouble for this, I'm sure, but that's okay. Most other religions, many other religions, certainly Judaism, are universalistic. That is, you don't have to believe the way we do to achieve ultimate salvation, to go to heaven, whatever. But Christianity recognizes that no matter how good a person you are, if you don't accept Jesus as your personal Savior, we go to John 3:16, that through him we achieve salvation, then you do not achieve salvation. And so the church plays an outside role in the breaches of separation of church and state, but they're not alone.
Right. So that probably set you on a path. It feels that you have been, as an educator, as someone that's passionate into the teaching of young people, and then this alternative view that's being pushed on by Moms of Liberties and others. You have been involved fighting that fight ever since then.
We recognize much of the activity, and you point out, I'll call them parental rights people. Moms for Liberty is just one of them. There are others who seem eager to extract or remove good public policy, good educational policy, and insert in their place church doctrine. And that's troublesome, to say the least. Yes, we have in our country the free exercise of religion, but at the same time, we are enjoined by the Constitution not to establish a religion. And they seem to say Christianity.
Make no laws.
Exactly. The
First Amendment.
First Amendment to the Constitution. And there shall be no established. By the way, it says Congress shall not establish religion. And some will say, well, this is not Congress, it's a state matter. But the 14th Amendment extends all the immunities that we have to each of us personally in the states, and therefore no one can foist upon us an established religion. All religions need to be equal in the eyes of our governmental institutions.
Sure.
I use the word governmental because our opposition says you want to erase religion from the public square. And nothing can be further from the truth. The truth is religion in the public square is fine. Religion in the government square is another matter, since I, through the coercion of taxation, and I have to pay my taxes, if the government winds up siding with religion. They're asking me to pay for religious ideas that may be an anathema, maybe make me uncomfortable.
Right.
By the way, people in Washington and Americans United for Separation Church State are unhappy when I say this kind of thing, but I say that in Florida, given our tax credit scholarship scheme, I'll call it, we Catholics are forced to pay taxes and support Seventh-day Adventist schools that teach that the Pope is the Antichrist. And Muslims are forced to support Baptist schools that teach that Islam is some kind of terrible, awful thing. And Mormons are forced to support Presbyterian schools when Presbyterians teach that Mormons are not Catholics. And so it's a complicated mess. And for that reason, the wisdom of our fathers came to us to say, let's not have government mixed in with religion.
Right.
Yeah.
So do you feel, or what are your thoughts even on this effort from the government to possibly remove the Department of Education, which is the government oversight and assistance format of standardized public schools, and the hidden agenda, I feel, of removing the public schools, which have the Constitution guidelines, and go to private or individual supported schools.
Right. Yeah. So what's going on? There is a war against public education. By the way, you'll note that they're called Moms for Liberty in particular, but others call them government schools. And forget, as Abraham Lincoln told us, dedicating the cemetery at Gettysburg in 1863, that our government is of the people, by the people, and for the people. Those are our schools, not government schools, because they try to create divisiveness is their stock and trade. So we are here, the government is here, we're against the government, and that's ripped from the headlines this morning, or what's going on in the government.
Daily?
Daily. So, in fact, those schools belong to all of us. They are public schools. Now, the state constitution requires that the state establish and that A is important because it's one system of excellent schools in which there's security and safety and high level of learning that goes on. We have not held our legislators' feet to the fire, and so we don't necessarily have that. So many groups are coming and saying, see, the public schools are failing. They're no good. They're not excellent. They're not good. They're not safe. And therefore, we should establish private schools. Now, that's fine until we get to the point, and the misnomer of school choice is not, we've always had school choice. When I was growing up, there was school choice. The question is, who's going to pay for you to go to an expensive private school? And they say the public schools are failing. Therefore, we want to send our children to a private school. By the way, sometimes a fancy private school, and we want you to pay for it. There's a Hebrew phrase called chutzpah that's become popular a little bit. Chutzpah is going into, let's say Best Buy, going up to the clerk and says, I want a 48-inch screen TV, and I want you to pay for it. And they want to send their children to private schools, and they want them to pay for it. By the way, it's the education that they get in those private schools, or even local charter school, we have the Imagine School, any better than a nearby public school? Testing indicates that it is not.
Right.
And those schools are often subpar, and we're paying for them.
Well, just recently in the last cycle, DeSantis pushed the voucher system and opened it up to anybody, financially or not. And I have some neighbors that have been going to Christ the King school here locally for years. And they couldn't get their kids in this time because they were full. Yeah. They only had so many seats. And so they were actually being affected by a decision of opening us up.
Yeah.
I recently interviewed Josh Wild, and he shared with me something. He's an educator, and he was pointing out mathematically that if the state of Florida loses the 15 to 18% of federal money, every school district would fail.
Yeah.
It's that tight. The budget is that tight.
Absolutely.
And so it's concerning at best, and coming from someone that, do you think they're using the religious as a red herring or a red flag to push other agendas going on here locally?
Certainly, the religious element brings out more people who are opposed to public schools, which are, after all, godless. By the way, and a school board member at a meeting said prayer is not allowed in public schools, and nothing can be further from the truth. As we say, as long as there are tests, and I've prayed before a test, as long as there are tests, there's going to be prayer, and prayer is fine. The kind of prayer, but the open public prayer that is sectarian, Christian or Muslim or Jewish or Buddhist, whatever, is not permitted, and it creates all sorts of entanglements that are problematic. But kids can pray, it's quite all right. But that's what they say. So their public schools are godless, is their red herring, is their false narrative, and therefore we need to create schools in which God is welcome.
How do we get people here in Palm Coast in which there's a low number of families that have kids in schools, and get them to be aware and participate? Because as we've talked earlier, we're all paying in our property taxes. Take a look at it, see what you're sending to the Flagler County schools, and yet the participation or the awareness or the conversation doesn't seem to be at a level it needs to be.
Yeah, no, it doesn't. And you're right. It's because people say, I don't have kids in the school, so I have nothing to say about it. It says, go look at your real estate, your property tax bill, and you'll see you're paying significantly for those schools. And so you should have something to say about them. And through, again, there's tax credit scholarship schemes and other schemes, we, through the state, are paying to send kids to private religious schools. And so we are paying for students to acquire and understand and be taught things that just don't fit or sometimes are against our own religion or our own individual beliefs. By the way, because of the legislation creating these private funds, these public funds that go to private schools, the state, no one is allowed to intervene in the curriculum, that is what is taught. So they're often taught that, the earth is flat, that the earth was created in 6 days, 5,800 years ago.
Slavery was beneficial and educational.
Slavery was a great and wonderful thing because it brought pagan blacks to these shores to be baptized in the name of Jesus. They teach, that Adam and Eve rode their dinosaurs to church every Sunday, and we're paying for that.
Right.
And so every person who, and even renters, by the way, pay their landlord, who then pays those taxes. All of us support the public schools. Our funds, our money, our hard-earned dollars are being channeled to support private schools that are unregulated, because that's part of the deal, that we're not going to regulate, and therefore do not have to have qualified teachers. Leslie Postal of the Orlando Sentinel has been a wonderful advocate for our side of this understanding. She'd been trying to interview private school principals. She called one particular, in the Pine Hill section of Orlando, one particular school, and had a hard time getting an appointment with the principal to be interviewed for an article for the Orlando Sentinel. Finally, in her frustration, she said something to the secretary in the school, and the secretary in the school says, well, he can't because he's taking college, he's taking courses, and he's not available much of the time because of these courses. And she says, oh, what school? What kind of courses? And the secretary said, was going to Valencia Community College to get his AA degree. So you could be a principal of these schools and not have an AA degree. You can teach in those schools without having a high school diploma. There are no requirements whatsoever. And that's part of the legislation that established things like the corporate scholarship tax scheme that you can channel those funds. The state stays out of requirements and has
I think
no
that
oversight.
Includes even homeschool, doesn't it?
Homeschooling is, yes. Yeah. Well, now, yes, thanks to Ron DeSantis' latest legislation, that just the legislature has become, of course, just a rubber stamp. It's not a deliberative body. So they passed this legislation that funds homeschooling. So a mother, by the way, Local Moms for Liberty, I understand, is headed by people who do not have college degrees and who are not been big subscribers to education in and of themselves, and they can teach their kids. It is easy, because I would be the privilege to do it in religious school settings, to watch kids who are homeschooled. By and large, by the way, they don't know how to hold a pencil or a pen. It's one thing. Also, their ability to socialize with other people is limited. In schools, you learn to socialize. You learn to get along with the kids sitting on your right and your left and behind you and in front of you and in a cafeteria. They don't do that in homeschooling, so that's yet another marker of homeschool kids. Homeschooling is really problematic because you have...
But there have been some successes and some very forward-thinking, involved parents have had some successes with it. And I think there's always going to be, for a variety of reasons, maybe the child has some issues and some things and they get served better than that. But you touched on the state guidelines, and the state sets the curriculum for all the schools, and we're moving away from what we used to call home rule or local control.
No question.
Do you think that it will get at some point that we won't even need county school boards?
Well, we need them now more than ever as that shift of which you speak takes place. So, yes, I was friendly when I was a rabbi in Seminole County with his name was Larry Furlong. He started out in politics on the school board and then went to the county commission. He said, well, the county commission, we get to do so much. In the school board, the state decides everything for us and so on. And so it is reasonable, and I urge everyone, I try to do it as well when we meet with state legislators, to say, what do you see as the three biggest differences between Miami-Dade County and Flagler County? And how do you take that into account when you create a rule for all schools in the state that applies the same? We are not the same. And therefore, the rules that might work at Miami-Dade won't work in Flagler, and the rules that work in Flagler won't work in Miami-Dade. We need to have local control, because we on the ground understand best what our students need.
As we do in many things that the state is trying to take away from us, including clean water and decisions of things that are going on. When I'm at a city meeting here in Palm Coast and people are complaining about the traffic lights on 100, and the mayor's response is, well, that's a state issue. And I have to take a breath and go, how and why is the state of Florida involved with setting the cycles of lights in our own community? But that has been a direction. Changing subjects a little bit, sure. I know that you, and I've participated in a few of those, you have this group, this podcast that you can find right here on our channel. And what's the name of it?
What's the name of it? Conversations in American Democracy.
Conversations in American Democracy. Right. Now tell me, how did that come about?
Okay, it began as an outgrowth from the local chapter, Atlantic Coast chapter of Americans United for Separation of Church and State. We would have every other month or so some kind of larger meeting and program and often use the library meeting room on issues of the LGBTQ issues and book banning and so on, and the scholarship schemes. And someone said, why don't we get together and talk about this some more over lunch? So I said, you know what? We're all eating lunch on Wednesdays, one place or another, whether at home or not. Why don't we? And so we started out at, like I mentioned, Kendall's Bagels, and we quickly outgrew that. There were too many. We were clogging up the restaurant. They were happy to sell us bagels. They were not happy about how we were clogging up the restaurant. And then Mike Colciola, coach, said, let's go to the Pine Lakes golf club. And so we went there and continued to meet every Wednesday. By the way, we tried to stop. There was a suggestion, well, for the summer, we'll shut down and take a summer break and so on. And several people said, wait a second, the Christian right isn't taking the summer off. Why should we take the summer off? So I said, okay, and once again, it would be satisfactory if two people, I said, I'll come and I'll eat lunch alone. It doesn't matter. Yet, as you see, we always get 7, 8, 9, 10, and sometimes 15 or 20. Then, can I mention the Rotondos? The Rotondos came along and said, well, this would, I presume, you know what, I don't know the full story either. You need to interview them in one of these podcasts. Did he? Okay. And said, let's turn this into a podcast. So I said, then why not? So let's give it a try. And they did it. And so far, it's been seemingly successful.
It has.
And thus, and then we turn to the Americans United for Separation of Church and State. Americans United for Separation of Church and State is an Internal Revenue Code 501c3 organization, like churches and most nonprofits. And it is required, it is thus exempt from taxation, and people who write a check to us can deduct that on their taxes. That privilege comes at the cost of our refraining from being involved in partisan political activity and supporting candidates. But more and more, our discussions were involved with politics. And in fact, I am betwixt and between over the issue of how to affect change. Can the world of 501c3 nonprofits that can't be involved in partisan politics, can they affect change? Or is it what happens at the ballot box? And I'm beginning to think more and more it's what happens at the ballot box. We need to elect the right people. And so we said that I discussed this with the people in Washington. They said, better divorce it from the AU, Americans United for Separation of Church and State. And so now we are just not affiliated with any national organization, but just a group of people who comes and talks about politics and how it affects us and how we can together move forward and build a better and stronger Flagler County and better and stronger community.
Well, I find in that participation and also in the interviews that I've had and with this podcast that it's all about informing the uninformed and how there are actions, like we were talking about the school board, and changes, and how your money, your property taxes, and those things that are occurred aren't getting out enough to let people know. And there's not a meeting that I don't go to and attend that I don't learn something new that I was completely unaware of, and how things are happening and decisions are made. And I was talking with someone recently, and they were sharing that here in Palm Coast, we're kind of in this media desert. We don't have big Jacksonville representation. We don't have Orlando representation. We have Flagler Live, which both of us have contributed to that, and several other small ones, but you have to go find them. Yeah. You have to go to that to find out what's happening. And so my hope, and I think yours and what we're trying to do, is to provide information, not disinformation, or a guidance to go and research, find out on your own what's happening, and go to a school board meeting. Or go to a county meeting or a city meeting and sit and listen and be proactive. Because I think as sadly, what we're experiencing today in our politics in general, at the state level and the city level and at the national level, the lack of information, the lack of understanding is very, very dangerous, and it's being used against us.
Yeah, absolutely. So we can divide any group, but certainly the residents of Flagler County, into, 4 groups. Those who make things happen, those who see things happen, those who know things happen, and those who don't know anything happened. And unfortunately, too many are in the don't know anything happened. By the way, some of this is a Sun Belt issue entirely. We've all moved from someplace else, and we're tired of what we dealt with up there. We don't feel that we have deep roots in this community, and many do not understand, right, the effect that these meetings, the government's decisions, the county commission, the city council, that they have on us. And we need to become more aware. The ignorance is also epidemic. I often wonder if we went through the population of Palm Coast with a U.S. map and asked them to find Iowa, whether they could find Iowa. Okay, let alone Ukraine or any place else.
Right.
And so, our job is to educate. Our job is to wake people up. Not wait, by the way, as you pointed out, not wait until they come to us. We need to go to them and say, wake up. You need to know what's happening. You are a citizen. You are a taxpayer. You have a vested interest here. You need to pay attention. And by the way, electoral turnouts underscore that people just don't seem to care.
Sure.
And
sure.
We need to wake them up. We need Paul Revere to say the British are coming, and a ride through every Middlesex town and farm, and wake people up.
So, Merrill, how do you feel right now? Are you hopeful that the people will wake up?
I'm always hopeful. There is always hope. What's that Pogo cartoon that says we have met the enemy and they are us? That we wind up accepting, but we have not done. Those of us who are what might be called the community of the committed to good government and committed to civics and civics education, we need to wake up and project more and get out there more. And I believe we're getting a wake-up call. I've heard over the weekend people talk about the future of our democracy, and some of them, one a former FBI director said, we've already lost our democracy. But if we don't stand up and express it at the polls and at meetings of, again, school board, county commission, city councils, then we will be lost. I feel and I hope, and on this I've been told that I'm worshiping the ground in which my head is stuck, that the pendulum is swinging back. That the pendulum is swinging our way, that we've gone too far in one direction and we're coming back to people being more involved. We will see.
Not as big as a swing as we've been having lately.
Yeah,
they've always gone
swung to the other
back
direction.
and forth.
Exactly.
It's interesting. As a Jewish man, and understanding that without great effort, history will repeat itself. And talking with other people from that religion and that history, they're scared. There are deja vu moments that are happening right now, and that people are afraid to point it out and to heed the warning signs. And it starts with those little actions before it becomes a tsunami that you can't stop, like the school board and things that you're so passionate about.
Right.
What can we do? What are things that we can do to stop or help or empower?
I think education is key. And I'm not just talking about public school or private school education. I'm talking about educating the public about what the problems, topics, and issues are that we are facing, and that they have a voice. And they can, by the way, they have a voice. There are some people on the right who feel they have a veto and says, no, you don't have a veto, but you have a voice, and your voice needs to be heard. Too many people are sitting on the sidelines and waiting to be caught up in the waves and the tsunami that's coming. And that's why I don't give up hope. We need to activate those people, and we need to explain. By the way, for better or for worse, that's a retail business. We have to do it on a one-on-one approach and speak with people. We think that we could do it on a wholesale basis, but it takes winning people over to recognize they have power, they have a vote, they pay taxes, their voices can be heard. I often wonder, your audience, I'm sure is aware, but there are so many who are not aware that every citizen is availed 3 minutes to speak to any one of these, again, the county commission, the city council, the school board. They can speak for 3 minutes and speak their mind and speak their piece, and more people should do it.
Yeah, I'm sad. I go to city hall meetings very consistently. Crickets. People aren't there.
Yeah.
And so I want to understand or believe, and one of the things, and you and I have talked about this, I have found that a lot of the religious churches and things in our area don't want to see a change. They want the separation. They see that as a confirming opportunity for them to teach their Sunday school and have open the doors to everyone. Do you think that the churches and synagogues that touch all those people are willing or able to motivate them as well to be active and proactive?
Many, yes, but perhaps in the wrong direction. Overwhelmingly, the clergy of this county, of Flagler County, are right-wing Republicans, and are quite happy with the idea that the public schools are godless, and therefore we need to establish private schools, that we need to remove certain books from school libraries and classroom libraries, and so on. With Reverend Bob Goolsby is one of the liberal clergy, one of the good guys in the Episcopal Church, St. Thomas Episcopal Church, and we've spoken about this and attempted to gather the liberal clergy within our community. And we decided that we probably, after surveying the turf, and discovered that we could probably hold a meeting in a phone booth. That there just are not that many of us. By its nature, Christianity, by its nature, religion in general. By the way, Judaism has the same thing, and so does Islam. Right-wing people that are, just are sometimes take a negative look at what the world is, and are not for a change. But the local liberal clergy, the three of us, the four of us, really see the need for change. There is a big misunderstanding about what role clergy and churches can play in nonpartisan issues. Houses of worship can speak up. Again, the stricture of Internal Revenue Code Section 501c3 says you can't engage in partisan politics on behalf of a candidate. But nonpartisan issues like book banning, like who uses what bathroom, how the government got involved, I'm taking too many sidesteps here, but how the government got involved in deciding who can use what bathroom and who cannot is not what our founders intended. But the liberal clergy, we need to speak up on that. But we are overwhelmed again by a tsunami of right-wing clergy who feel.
There's a great editorial, I can't remember exactly where, and they were talking about the reason why they're reducing the power of the IRS, one of them, is to afford and allow 501c churches and religions to freely speak about politics from the pulpit, hand out literature, and support their view of their person in clear violation of the law which can't be supported because they've gotten rid of all the people that go out and investigate the law.
There's no question. Americans United for Separation of Church and State on a national basis and locally as well have filed complaints against violations. We had a famous violation here 2.5. When was the last? It was the 2022 election, in which a pastor brought up onto the pulpit 2 candidates for a school board and endorsed them and said and so on, even though they had agreed for their 501c3 status, their tax exempt status, they had agreed not to do so. And they were what we need to do, and was successful in that case, is to say, don't you subscribe to the 10 Commandments, particularly the one that says, thou shalt not bear false witness? Didn't you falsely witness that you would refrain from political activity? And we think that we sufficiently embarrassed them. But they endorsed candidates right there and then. And those candidates went on to win. I don't know on the power of that endorsement or for what purpose. By the way, there was a third candidate endorsed by a church. She lost, interestingly, but it was quite a battle. And the law is not well understood,
Sure.
just as all sorts of civic matters
But
are not.
to applaud you and your effort in the last cycle, we actually got a Democrat on the board here in Flagler.
Right.
And she was elected with a lot of support from the Republicans, because we know we're 2-1 here.
Yeah.
And so it does happen. And we can win
Yeah.
with education and effort from
Right.
people like yourself and others.
Yeah. And it's why my message is, right, we cannot give up hope.
Exactly.
And in fact, we now talk of preemptive surrender. Preemptive surrender. That is, before we even get to the game, we decided we're going to lose. No, we
Right.
have to go in there and gird our loins and get busy.
You can't sit by and let it happen. After it happens, you got to pick up the ball and keep running.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. Merrill, it was really great bringing you in here to talk with us. You've got so much passion going on. I really want to applaud the podcast that you're putting out. I do
you.
participate
We're
in
glad
it, but others do, and it's a great round table opportunity. Talk about a lot of things that are going on, a lot of new things, a lot of information. So in closing, is there anything you want to share that you're passionate about, things that are happening today?
I want people to read Flagler Live or read The Observer that has another, or simply to become informed. By the way, to visit, attend one of those meetings of the county commission, city council, school board, possibly to speak at them, to place in their smartphones the phone numbers of and we'll wait to see who our U.S. representative is, but even our senators, to place their numbers there and to make calls and express their feelings. It's not scary or frightening, but you have to take that first step. And I'll be happy, and many of us are happy, to hold the hands of people who are a little queasy about this, but this is, you are, again, ours is a government of the people, by the people, for the people, and you are the people.
What's the first 3 words of our Constitution?
We the people.
We the people.
Right. We all need to be involved. It's all our responsibility, and we all need to show up at the polls on April 1st. Or to vote early, vote by mail. But if you are silent, then you are responsible for the outcome. You need to speak up. You need to vote.
Right. As I tell everybody I can, we here in Flagler County, District 6, have been given the greatest gift in the entire country.
Yeah.
The Trump administration selected our representative who has resigned. We have an opportunity, April 1st, remember that date, have a plan to get out and vote, to let your voice be heard at a national level. We are only 3 seats away from the House of Representatives flipping it. There's 3 votes in the nation, and we're the first. So your voice, if you're upset, if you have a concern, your voice, you are speaking for every Democrat, liberal, independent in the entire country that can't do anything right now. Utah, Colorado, all these other states that are being, I use the word touched, not always a good thing. And here in Flagler County and in District 6, you have the responsibility to vote for that voice because they can.
I might add that there are, and I hear often, they're politicians, there's Tweedledee and Tweedledum. It says you need to find out the differences between these two candidates, Weil and Fine, and you'll find that they're vastly different. One is going to resonate with you, one is not. And you need to take that and demonstrate it at the polls by voting.
So with that,
Well, thank you.
thank you so much. Appreciate you coming by. There's
pleasure.
more to follow. I'm very much happy and enjoying putting out this information for you guys. I hope that you're out there researching for your own. Verify, verify. I heard a quote the other day. Ronald Reagan said, trust, but verify.
Absolutely.
Thanks a lot. Appreciate it.
Take care.